With every single review before this one, by the time I sat down to write my script, I knew more or less exactly what I was going to write. Whether it was a good episode or a bad episode, I had plenty of stuff I wanted to talk about, and pretty much all I had to do was just figure out what order to do it in, and how to make it flow from one idea to the next in a way that made some semblance of sense. But that can't be said here, because episode 14 of MLP Season 6, The Cart Before the Ponies, really doesn't give me much to work with. There's no in-depth character stuff for me to babble about, as in my Newbie Dash, No Second Prances, or Flutterbrudder reviews. There's nothing special to distinguish it like Heartwarming Tale, Saddle Row Review, or last week's episode. And I can't even bitterly dissect it like I did Applejack's Day Off, because I can't really work up any hate for what it does. It's hard to when it doesn't really do a whole lot in the first place. Even Spice Up Your Life, which I felt was a relatively unremarkable episode, gave me a ton of stuff to talk about with its interesting conclusion, new characters, and somewhat unsatisfactory writing, not to mention the return of the map. In comparison, what does this episode have but characters we know acting in vaguely frustrating ways as it meanders towards a decent but entirely obvious conclusion? The answer? Pretty much nothing beyond a new earworm of a song and Cheerileader in a cheerleader outfit. Both of which are nice things to have, granted, but I just expect a little more takeaway from an episode. And I don't want it to sound like my expectations are too high. One way a lot of people try to defend Applejack's Day Off is in saying, oh, it's like a Season 1 episode. You've just been spoiled on so many big event episodes that you can't appreciate the tamer slice of life stuff anymore. And my response to that is no, it's not like Season 1 at all, because Season 1 did not suck. Well, most of it didn't at least. I guess something like Showstoppers is about as dull and annoying as Applejack's Day Off, at least until we get to the good part. But that's not really a defense of the episode, now is it? But those people were right insofar as not every episode has to be some epic game changer to be good. A lot of the episodes I like are in fact built around simpler conceits. Sister of Social, for instance, one of my favorite episodes ever, and it's a simple story about sibling bonds. No adventure, no fantasy elements, no new characters, not even a song. Basically no frills. It had emotion though. It had these really thoughtful and engaging character moments. It was just satisfying and one of the best we've ever seen. And it's not the only episode that has gotten greatness out of a more reserved concept. Ponyville Confidential worked real magic out of here's some random new thing for the CMC to try this week, and the list could go on. The point is, a smaller scope isn't really an excuse for mediocrity. Even if an episode sticks to the simpler conceits, it should at least be trying to give us something especially worthwhile. And I think the fact that The Cart Before the Ponies really doesn't is its biggest fault. But that's probably enough about what the episode doesn't do. Let's talk about what it does do. For starters, it has a rather interesting opening scene. Did the sudden physics lesson that Cheerileader sprung on the kids out of nowhere remind anyone else of this?
Today we are going to be talking about robots!
Though actually, with its stubbornly oblivious characterizations, there's something kind of evocative of friendship is witchcraft about the entire ordeal, albeit without the wide-eyed irony and winking cynicism that makes FIW absolutely hilarious. A lot of people are critical of how the older sisters act in the episode, which is understandable given they act pretty horrible in it, but I can't really get too mad or call it a mischaracterization. They're written the way they are intentionally, and it doesn't really feel off to me as we've seen this kind of stuff or worse from them all before. But while I can't say they feel off, they definitely are off-putting. Especially Applejack. And I know how that's going to sound to a lot of you. Oh, RarityDash, she's your least favorite, you're just taking the chance to go after her again. No, I'm really not. Applejack's behavior in the episode just kind of irks me. And I will remind you, as I'm one to do, that I'm someone who has no problems with and actually enjoys how she acts in Some Pony to Watch Over Me. Because there I can rationalize it. She's just been suddenly confronted head-on with the idea that Apple Bloom is growing up, which in reflex triggers all these extreme, overprotective urges. Here though, it's hard to really explain or defend her behavior. She is utterly dismissive to Apple Bloom, who makes what she wants very clear, clearer than either of her friends, and her "this is the way we do it, so we're doing it this way" outlook is just kind of aggravating, bringing back memories of the unbearably dense her we saw in Applejack's Day Off. It honestly makes me start to wonder if she didn't draw the entirely wrong conclusion from episodes like Super Speedy Cider Squeezy and Apple Family Reunion, and since decide that any attempts to streamline or modernize her practices are inherently wrong and should be shut down. Moreover, unlike the other two, there's a failure to draw any kind of meaningful personal connection between her and the episode's events. We don't hear about her own derby experience at all, which leads us to just conclude that she's forcing Apple Bloom through this unpleasantness against her will, not for anyone's benefit, but instead just because yay tradition. And the frustrating thing is that Apple Bloom had a much more viable second option than either of her friends. I mean, they all do have other options, but Apple Bloom specifically has another older sibling, and after Brotherhood Social, I think it's safe to say that Big Mac would have been utterly delighted to help her with her cart, would have put her happiness ahead of anything else, and would have been completely on board with the idea of winning the race. When it comes to the other two, meanwhile, Rarity is distinguished in that she has proper motivation for her actions. It's petty, sure, but her flashback, the funniest scene in the entire episode by the way, makes clear the level of trauma this was to her. What's less clear is why whatever sadistic Pegasus shoved that rain cloud up over her to compound said trauma. Friend of Derpy rubbing it in, perhaps? Whatever the case, Rarity is out to make up for the past, and that has her getting carried away make all the more sense, which makes it all the more palatable. Rainbow, meanwhile, well, she just doesn't act quite as terrible as the other two, period. A lot of that is on Scootaloo, though, who is both such a font of misguided optimism at the start, and also a lot less clear about what she actually wants. There's a reason she's the one who says the "it's hard speaking to older ponies" line at the end, and that's because she's the only one here who clearly really experienced that problem. The other two, they were pretty upfront about what they wanted, and were shut down. Scoots kind of beats around the bush though, which gives Rainbow a chance to just misunderstand her intent and instead become wrapped up in herself until she gets out of hand. Only once do we see her actually tell Rainbow what she wants in clear terms, and the response seems to indicate that Rainbow didn't exactly hear her. And even then, Rainbow is the only one who was never shown to shut Scootaloo out entirely when making the cart. Every indicator is that, well, yes, she is indeed removing most of Scoot's ridiculous forced chicken meme additions, she is at least having her help the entire way through. Which is probably for the best considering the relationship the two have. I don't think anyone wants to see Rainbow being truly terrible to Scootaloo, I know I don't. And I think it's very much intentional that things do seem a bit different for the two of them as compared to the others, given the writer for the episode is Ed Valentine, the guy behind Flight to the Finish. And while I do appreciate that small bit of nuance, and I am glad to have Valentine back writing episodes after season 5 without him, it's hard for me to call this one an especially great piece of writing. It's all just so obvious, both in that you know exactly where it's going almost entirely before the older ponies even appear in the story, and that it slaps you in the face with its message again and again like it's afraid you won't be able to piece it together on your own. And in that way, this one does actually invoke Season 1 CMC episodes like Stairmaster and Showstoppers for me, but that's not a good thing. Now, I'm not expecting subtlety from My Little Pony. That would be kind of absurd. It should be something kids can easily understand and enjoy. But kids are smarter than we often think. All the repetition of dialogue, I'm gonna win most creative, I'm gonna win most traditional, it's really not needed for anyone. We know what they're doing, just have them do it and have it be fun. Speaking of fun, let's talk about the good part of the episode, the part that actually was a considerable amount of fun. The song. Derby Racers is another delightful and unique addition to the Season 6 catalog of songs. It's no tour de force as far as the singing is concerned, but it's poppy, catchy, and just satisfying. The giddy-up chorus is especially infectious and charming. The lyrics are, well, I guess they kind of tie into what I was saying about reiterating the main ideas of the episode to no end, but I can excuse it because it sounds pretty good. And also, the race sequence accompanying it is really cool. The animators clearly put a lot of work into it, giving us all sorts of different shifting perspectives on the carts, lots of eye-catching visual effects, and appealing transitions as the focus goes back and forth between all the characters. And the racing action is pretty amusing too, especially Rarity making good use of the wings on a ridiculous swan cart to block out the competition. It's a really enjoyable sequence to me, and it's not the only good part. As said, Rarity's flashback was utterly hilarious, and there were a number of other halfway amusing lines and moments scattered throughout the episode. Can't forget Cheerileader Cheerily either, that needed to be a thing. On the whole though, it doesn't really add up to much. It's inoffensive and perfectly watchable, but I just don't feel like I've gained anything from it by the end. Honestly, when I do return to this one, I'm pretty sure it will just be for the song. The rest of the episode, it just seems kind of extraneous next to that short 2.5 minute sequence, and that's not really a good thing for an episode. So, yeah, I guess this one I would say is more of a miss than a hit, especially as compared to the rest of Season 6. It's hard to call it terrible, but then again, it's hard to really call it much of anything. This has been a RarityDash review, thanks for watching, and see you soon.